Hello, today we're going to be going through a tutorial to import VRC avatars into VSeeFace using the VRM format. The tutorial does already assume you have a knowledge of Blender to an intermediate level and Unity to about a basic level. With that said, the process isn't too difficult at all. If you've either made or have a model that works in VR chat, we need to open this up in Blender first. We then need to add a number of shape keys in addition to the basic ones that will already be on it due to VR chat. We're going to need some emotions, specifically joy, happy, sorrow, and angry. If you just add these onto the shape keys, this will be part of the import. Blink.R and blink.L. This is just a simple matter of separating your blink into a left and a right. And then look up, look down, look left, and look right. Now these actually move the eyes. If we look in here closely, if I look up, the eyes also move with it. With those shape keys set, we can now export it as an FBX. As long as you've only got the mesh and the rig in the file, you shouldn't need to select any of these settings over here. Save it as a file that you are going to know. Yay. There is another thing we are going to need. We need UniVRM. To find this, go to Google and just simply type in UniVRM and it should be the first link, or at least the one that's connected to the GitHub page. When you click on it, it should look like this. What we would then want to do is scroll down a little bit to where it says latest version and then go to the releases page. Click on this link here. It's this one, or at least the top one that you're going to want. You click onto that and then down here there's a little asset drop down menu. You want to click there, and then there's one called Unity VRM package. Save this package somewhere where you're going to find it. Open up a version of Unity 2019 or above. Right now, I'm going to be using 2020.3.2 F1 for reference. A very similar process to the SDK. We want to then hit Assets, Import Package, Custom Package, and that UniVRM file we downloaded, we just want to hit Open. It should take a few seconds and a little menu will appear. Don't click anything, just hit the import button. It will then import this package, which is what will allow us to create the VRM model. If this little extension pops up, just hit use recommended. It will just change the file over. It is fine, don't panic. Once it's done, hit accept all. So if that's installed correctly, you should see Uni GLTF and VRM 0 up at the top, and also a few new folders down here. Excellent. So, next we want to create a new folder for our character. So for me, it is Kid. So in this new folder, you want to add your character. If you select all of your textures and the FBX file at the same time and drag and drop them in, Unity should load the textures already onto the model, which is what we want. It saves some time. Once this is done, we'll move on to the next bit. Unity loading bars. It's the fun part of life, isn't it? So if you select onto the FBX file and drop it onto here, this will make sure it's centered in the scene. It means you don't have to work around with him. If you then click onto Cade in the asset tray, or your own model, I should say, we have these tabs up here. First, we want to go to the Model tab, and we want to go to where it says Legacy Blend Shape Normals here. We want to make sure that this is ticked. It is on. Then we want to go down to where it says Normals Mode, and there is a drop-down menu. We want to select Area Weighted. Then hit Apply. This is just to make sure the normals do work in VSeeFace and other VRM programs. Then we want to go over to the Rig tab. We want to change it from a generic rig to a humanoid rig. We then want to hit Apply and let it do its little thing. Once done, we should see a little tick here by next to the Configure button, but we still actually need to go into it. We want to hit Configure, and we want to make sure that all the bones are selected. For example, on this one, we can see that the chest is actually there. Then we want to go here, and there's some bones here that have snuck in. If we want to delete any bones that shouldn't be where they are, we also, and you just do that by selecting onto the bone and hitting the delete key. We also want to get rid of the eye bones. We will not be using the eye bones for tracking. We will be using shape keys. I find personally shape keys are a little more interactive than they are with the bones. Once this is all good and you're happy with the model, hit apply and done. Very much the same process as VR chat. Done. Lastly, we want to extract these materials and change them over to VRM formatted ones. So what we want to do is we want to extract materials into the same folder. I usually always work on the same folder with the VRM stuff because there's not actually as much as what you'll need with VR chat models. On each material, simply select the material in the asset tray and then go up to the materials up here. Since we've installed that package, there will be VRM specific materials and we can change them over to these material. Now, you can actually just use standard materials nowadays. However, I would advise, at least for the first import into VSeeFace and other programs, to make sure that you have a version of the model with VRM textures on it. Simply put, it'll just make it a lot easier when you come to do some fault finding, which, trust me, you will do at some point. But don't worry about it so much. Change them over to the VRM format and we should be good. Now I am actually going to tweak some of these materials so that they actually work properly. Ooh, we are missing a couple of textures. I'll get back to you. So with those textures added back into the scene, if you have any materials that are missing, just simply drag and drop the texture into here. Just be aware, sometimes the albedo will be a slightly different color, which will lead in the texture looking like it's incorrect. Such as here on his floof here. You just simply need to make sure that this is pure white to make sure you're getting the true color. Now, this also has a bit of transparency on this texture, so what we do want to do is change the rendering type to cutout. There is also the glasses, which also needs a change because we don't want to be looking at solid glasses. So this one we want to change to transparent, and we want to change the lit color and move the alpha, and we can change how exactly transparent these are going to be. I'm just going to have them relatively transparent like that. Great. So with that, your materials are all done. The FBX side of it is done. What we now want to do is we want to export it first as a VRM. So we go up to here, and up here we want to go to export VRM, the top one. Now, if you get this error, it's because I did a mistake. What we need to do first is we actually need to select it in the scene, then go to your VRM 0. And then you should get something that looks very similar to this. So what you want to do is, first of all, scroll down a little and we want to give it a title. So for this, for example, this is me, this is Cade. The version is actually 1.4 for me. And the author is, wouldn't you guess? It's Cade Art. It's me. Contact information and reference are both optional. Contact reference generally refers to things like, Twitter, DMs, that kind of thing. Reference, for what I'm aware, is for things like if it's from a show or what it is. If you want a picture or a texture to go with the VSeeFace rig, which will be this image here, you simply drag and drop a texture into the scene and drop it in there. We also then want to check export settings. If you look here, there's a few bits here. We want to go to export settings and we want to make sure that pose freeze is ticked. And we want to make it T-pose. This will actually force the model into a proper T-pose. Once you've got all that done, we want to hit export. And then we want to save it somewhere that makes sense. So in this case, it will be the Cade tutorial. Once that's exported, we actually want to bring it back into the scene again. So now we have to go back up to VRM and we want to import it. We then will want to find where that VRM file is. It should automatically find where you last saved it. Click on it and hit open. Another folder will open up. This is simply the Unity project. Make sure you save the model prefab into the Cade scene because it will add a couple of folders. So we hit save that, and if we give it a few seconds, it should load in. It might take a couple of moments. Great. It's in. So what we want to now do is you'll actually notice that there's two models of Cade now. There is one that's a prefab, there is one that's an FBX. We are actually done with this FBX, so we can go up to the inspector and click off it. The rest of the work will be done on the prefab. So if you grab this and then drag and drop it into the scene here, we will now have more information than was on the previous one. You can actually add the image and such here. You can do a lot of the editing work here. But what we want to do is we want to scroll down to where it says VRM Blendshapes Proxy. There is then Blendshapes here. What we want to do is double click onto them and it will open up a small little menu. I'd recommend making this bigger. And what you can see is we've got a selection of shape keys, which are the shape keys that we've already set. Now, the first few you'll already have because it's a VR chat avatar. The next ones are the ones that we added in Blender just before. Simply select onto one of these shape keys, go to this menu, and then fill them in. You'll see in this little preview what it will look like. So if I go to this one, and then find E, great. Go to U. Now for the U one, I generally keep this one a bit more subtle. I only put it to 60%. But you've got to kind of figure out what works for your model. Nothing is entirely certain. If you're unsure though, just go for a 100%. Just throw it right on there. It can only be over the top. And sometimes that works quite well, doesn't it? So it is as simple as this. We just go through them. Blink. Joy. There is one called Joy, which for me is a blip. These shape keys as well, these angry, joy, they can actually be any expression or emotion or any shape key in general. It's just useful because other softwares will use this. I've done sorrow, I'm forgetting what I'm saying. Terrible. This is the best tutorial you've ever watched. Fun. So fun is, for me, happy. I always usually do a quite thing smile. So look up. These are the specific eye shape keys that we added in before. So look up. And like I say, you'll see that Cade's eyes actually move with them. That is quite important, and why we separate them out from the look up and look down of the SDK3 models. From one left, and then look right, and then after this, we then have the blink L and blink R. Now, you don't technically need these. You can get along without them. Like that first import would actually work in VSeeFace if you wanted to check it. But generally, you want your blend shapes working, right? And with that, we've got all of them. Yay! So what we want to do now, we want to click back onto him in the scene. We want to scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be one called Blend Look at Bones Applier. We are going to remove this component. We do that by hitting these little buttons here, and then there is a Remove Component button. Click. We then want to add a component back in, and we want to add in VRM Look at Blend Shape Applier. We are going to use those blend shapes. You don't need to touch this. Most of it will work right off the bat. With the blend shapes applied, there's very few little things that we actually need to do left. So one of the only things is to move this first person offset. This is pretty much like the viewport out of VR chat. So just move that to where it's kind of in the middle of the eyes. That's all good. Then we're going to add the spring bones, which is VRM's dynamic bones. So if you actually hit this little drop down menu here, we'll see that there's the Cade rig and prefab in general, then there's the mesh, and then there's also a thing called secondary. If we click onto secondary, we'll see that there's a spring-bone script here. Great. What this is doing is, this is your dynamic bones. It does have some advantages. We can actually add more root bones. For example, Cade has 4 ears. So I'm going to type in 4. This will give me the option to put 4 dynamic bone paths in. So I'm going to hit ear O2, simply because most mine are at O2. Now, you will notice sometimes that because we've got both FBX and the package in the scene, that you get 2 different types of ears for the same one. Make sure you're hitting the one that's like more like a sealed box than the one that's like got a little bit of grey on it. So ear O2L. Ignore my amazing naming scheming here. It's our personal model, so I'm like, haha. What effort? What is that? Ear O2R and ear O2 R O1. There we go. So great. His ears now have those dynamic bones. We want to test them. So what we want to do is we want to save the scene and then hit play. It'll take us to this view. We don't want this one. We want to go to scene. It's literally the same thing if you've ever worked in VR chat. Now, you can't just immediately move this. You've got to click onto Cade VRM, so you're actually selecting the model itself. I'd recommend going to a rotate mode and then seeing how those ears swish. And look, you can see them swishing now. If you want to change these values, you go back to secondary, and the main 2 that you'll want to change is stiffness, which as you'd imagine, would change the stiffness and the force. Basically, switching between these two values here, this will get you a nice idea of what it is you're after. And we'll just add those to the rest of Cade off screen. Quick little tip while I'm at it. If you're in the play mode, once you hit play, you'll lose the values that you've been testing with. If you want to keep a hold of them, I recommend you go to the little 3 dots there and copy the component. That way when you hit the play button and it resets the component, you can just simply paste those values back in. With those spring bones set, we are now ready to export the guy again. So if we go to VRM and we export, what I want to do is I actually want to drop a little image into this texture slot here. So I actually have brought in a sticker here, which I'm just going to slap in there. There we go. Everything else should already be reset. Just make sure that these warnings say that your pose freeze has already been set once before. Other than that, you then select what you want down here. So if you want it for commercial use or you want to allow any of these acts or such, you can do what you would like. Hit export. Once again, I'm going to save this into a sensible place. With that now exported, basically bring up VSeeFace. What you want to do is select Add Avatar, and then we want to find that avatar that we have just saved. So, and there he is. If it's loaded, we should see it here. And if I click onto there, we've got him there. I'll go to select, and boom, there we go. And you can even see it's changed it for me. So that is pretty much it. It's not the most complex of import processes. There are definitely more difficult ones out there, but we now have him in VR chat. You got your swishy ears, swishy hair, because I added the spring bones to the hair as well. Yeah, that is it. Obviously, you might run into some issues. If you do, have a look yourself first, but if you get really stuck, feel free to contact me on Twitter. I'll usually try and help, although bear in mind I might not be able to help everybody. With that said, well done. You just went through a tutorial, and this is my first one, so I hope it was okay. Let's go through the good old YouTuber stuff. You liked it, please do the buttony thing. It's apparently good, I don't know. And if you'd like to, subscribe, because that's what the people say, right? And yeah, oh, if you want to test your emotions as well, Control Shift F2 F3, that should get it through. Look, he gets so angry, his eyebrows literally come through his glasses. Excellent. Didn't say it was perfect, but there you go. Hope you have a lovely day now, and thank you for watching.